At last, Mark was ready to make the rescue. He had no idea how long the suffering animal had been trapped, but he felt a strong determination to help. He reached out to his friends, confident they would be eager to assist and had the skills needed for the task. However, none of them fully understood what they were about to save. As they prepared, Mark struggled to resist the urge to rush to the animal. Knowing that would be a mistake, they wouldn't get another chance, so it was crucial that they succeeded on their first attempt. Through the thick mud, Mark guided the others toward a beaver, but their belief that everything was under control was a mistake. Keeping his eyes on the terrified animal, Mark waded through the mud of the riverbank. Knowing that the animal was wild, he reminded himself to be cautious. Becoming acquainted with a beaver's teeth and claws would not be fun. Even if it was dangerous for him, he felt it was necessary to rescue the animal. However, he soon realized he hadn't taken every danger into consideration. Now that he was within a few feet of the creature, he began to feel that something was off. Mark was just inches away from the animal when he realized his mistake. He noticed something he had missed before, and his heart raced. It was too late to back away. The sticky mud made a quick escape impossible. If the creature attacked, his life would be in danger. He glanced back at his friends, filled with dread. One of them asked, "What's wrong?" Mark could only say, "That's no beaver." The others looked puzzled but quickly understood it was something much worse. Despite their fear, Mark insisted they still needed to rescue the creature. Moving closer, he saw it was too large for a beaver, and its teeth were massive fangs. He gently placed his hand on the animal, feeling its ragged breaths through its matted fur. After tying a rope to his waist and passing it to his friends, he wrapped his arms around the creature and shouted for them to pull. They managed to free it from the mud, but as soon as it realized it was free, it reacted violently. Mark and his friends soon realized they couldn't defend themselves against what they had just released. Dan, an average man from Kansas City, had spent his childhood near the forests, often hiking with his father. As he grew older, he became familiar with the trails, but he never expected to encounter something like this. When he was just a kid, Mark had already chosen his dad as his idol. He dreamed of being just like him and becoming a policeman. Mark wanted to be able to save other people's lives and protect those unable to do so themselves. Immediately after completing high school, Mark joined the police academy. He graduated at the top of his class. His scores were the highest in his class. Even some of the instructors told him he was just like his father. They were big shoes to fill, but he knew he could do it. Mark enjoyed doing exactly what he had wanted to do growing up. He was willing to do things many people weren't, but he didn't know that one day he'd have to put it to use. Mark made sure to make friends with the right people. He had a buddy who was in the military and another in construction. These were people willing to do whatever it took to get the job done. They were strong-willed, and that's what he loved in people. One day, they would all be pushed to their limits. On a typical Saturday, Mark decided to go for a hike. He woke up at 8 a.m., excited about the whole day ahead, as he rarely took a day off. He chose to hike one of his dad's old trails, a special one he didn't use often because it felt too meaningful. The trail even crossed a stream at one point and was his dad's favorite. Since his father had passed away a few years ago, hiking this trail was one of the few times Mark felt connected to him again. He preferred to walk it alone, having hiked with friends plenty of times before. He made the preparations to head out into the nearby forest. Thankfully, he hadn't moved too far from where he lived as a kid, which meant that all the familiar woods were never far away. But today would be full of surprises for the off-duty cop. Mark walked into the woods alone and immediately smelled the soil in the air. It had just stormed the day before. This meant that the mud was thick enough to swallow his shoes if he wasn't careful. He loved walking into the cool, shaded forest when it had just rained. It brought back fond memories of his father. As he continued toward the stream, Mark approached and saw something that didn't look right. The riverbank looked like a muddy mess, but he saw something brown against the gray. He decided to walk closer, but what he saw made his heart drop. While it was a rare sight, beavers inhabited the woods. Mark always loved seeing woodland creatures on his walks, but this one needed help. Here's a grammatically corrected version of your script. Mark quickly assessed the situation. The beaver was stuck in the mud and barely moving. He knew that it wouldn't last much longer without any food. He sprang into action, but then he realized something. It was no good if he got stuck, and the animal could retaliate if it was scared. He knew that he couldn't do this alone. Mark grabbed his phone and decided it was best to call the people he could rely on. He called his friends, who were the perfect people for the job. Harry and William told him they'd be there as soon as they could. No one was going to let a poor creature die on their watch, but they were mistaken about it being helpless. After half an hour, Harry and William arrived with the equipment Mark had requested, including a long rope. They agreed to pull him out once he got hold of the creature. It wouldn't be easy, but they couldn't wait for rescue services. Mark felt confident with his friends by his side. He had prepared well for the rescue. The poor animal had been stuck for who knows how long, and Mark knew his friends would help without hesitation, even if they didn't know what they were really saving. As they got closer, Mark wanted to rush to the animal, but he knew that wasn't wise. They had only one chance to save it, so they had to make it count. Mark led the way through the thick mud toward the creature, but things were not as under control as they thought. As he pulled himself closer, he realized he needed to be cautious. A wild animal could be dangerous. Just a few feet away, he sensed that something was very wrong. Mark got close to the animal before he recognized his mistake. There was something else he hadn't seen before. He felt his heart start to pound, but there was nothing he could do now. He had already gotten too close to the creature, and with the thick mud, he wouldn't be able to retreat. He knew that if it chose to attack, he would be at its mercy. Mark felt dread creep up his spine as he looked back at his friends with a look of terror on his face. "What is it?" one of his friends asked, but all Mark could mutter was, "Not a beaver." The rest of the men looked at him in confusion. From the look on his face, they could tell this was something far worse than any beaver, but the real question was what their next move would be. Mark took a deep breath and said, "We still have to save it." The rest of the men agreed. No matter what kind of creature it was, it didn't deserve this fate. Now venturing into the unknown, Mark crept closer. It was far too big to be a beaver, and instead of oversized front teeth for chewing through wood, there were large fangs. He inched closer until he was within touching distance. Now he could help pull the animal out of the muddy bank. No doubt the animal was tired from struggling for who knew how long. He wondered if it had any strength left to fight back. He counted to 3 and put his hand lightly on the animal. He could feel its deep breathing through the matted fur, but he still had no idea what it was. Mark had gotten this far without incident. He tied the rope around his waist and passed it to his friends. He slowly put his arms around the creature and shouted, "Pull!" The men started heaving him out of the mud, but they had no idea what they were doing. They managed to unearth the creature from the mud, but as soon as it knew it could move, it sprang into action. The men didn't stand a chance against what they had unleashed. The 3 men were now facing danger head-on. The animal was in a defensive stance, waiting to see what they would do next. Now that it was free, they could clearly see it was a wolf stuck in the mud. They had heard how dangerous wolves could be. Even for 3 grown men, the wolf stared at them, its fur bristling and its golden eyes fixed on them. No one knew what would happen next. It all depended on the wolf's next move. But just as quickly as it had gone on the defensive, the wolf seemed to relax and turn to walk away. Before disappearing behind the trees, it looked back at the men, as if they shared a moment of understanding. Then it vanished. Mark and his friends knew they would never be the same. The experience had changed them, and they felt proud to have saved such a beautiful creature.